Honorable Supreme Court Justices, tribal nation leaders, constitutional officers, member of the Wisconsin National Guard, and active and retired members of our armed forces, cabinet members, Senate President Roth, Majority Leader Fitzgerald, Minority Leader Schilling, Speaker Voss, and Minority Leader Hentz, legislators, distinguished guests, and most importantly, the people of Wisconsin, welcome and thank you for being here tonight. My partner in mischief, Kathy, is up in the gallery tonight, along with our daughter, Katie, our son-in-law, Colin, their daughter, Hannah, our son, Nick, and our daughter-in-law, Landa. Where are you folks? I can't see you. Thank you so much for your love and support. I'm with you, and I won't embarrass you tonight. I'm Tony Evers, and I'm incredibly proud to be here as the 46th governor of the state of Wisconsin to deliver my second State of the State address. As I reflect on my first year in office, although there were setbacks and occasional political posturing, what I call huffing and puffing, we also had a lot of success, and I'm proud of everything we accomplished in just a year's time. One of the best parts of doing my job is getting out of the Capitol and visiting with people all across the state. And holy mackerel, that's what I did. Lieutenant Governor Barnes and I visited all 72 Wisconsin counties this past year. Actually, the bad news is that Lieutenant Governor Barnes and I raced to see who could be the first to visit those 72 counties, and he beat me by about 5 days, but the good news is we're just a few weeks into 2020, and I've already got a head start on you this year. This past year, we also brought science back to the state of Wisconsin. And we acknowledge that climate change exists and it's a threat we need to start taking seriously. Lieutenant Governor Barnes is the chair of the Climate Change Task Force, working with local governments, industry and business leaders, and people from across the state on environment, stewardship, and sustainability. Thanks, Lieutenant Governor Barnes, for your good work on this. I'm also proud that I was able to sign executive orders affirming equity, inclusion, respect, and dignity for the state workers in this great state. Last year, I visited every single one of our agencies to thank our employees and to hear about the good work they're doing in our state. We should be proud of the folks who serve Wisconsinites every day, and I look forward to continuing to listen and elevating their voices and their work. I also promised that criminal justice reform would be a central part of my administration. Although we have a lot of work to do on this issue, we made some important progress this year. For the first time in 8 years, a governor stepped a foot inside of one of our correctional institutions. And actually, it wasn't just one, I visited 6. The Wisconsin Parole Commission is working to make sure we get our parole system back on track. Our Parole Commission Chair, John Tate II, is here with us in the gallery tonight, and he has been doing a great job. Thanks for all your work on this issue, John. Part of reforming our criminal justice system is believing in forgiveness and the power of redemption, things that I think speak to the character of our state. This past year, I also made good on my campaign promise to reinstate the Pardon Review Board. We granted the first pardons in our state in 9 years, offering forgiveness and a second chance to those folks who've made amends in their own lives and their communities. Congratulations to Katie and Annette, who are two of the folks we pardoned since taking office, and they're also up there in the gallery, and thank you for your being here. State of the State address, I asked the legislature to set politics aside so we could work together on the issues facing our state. I said I expected bills to be passed with broad support and in the spirit of bipartisanship. So one of the things I'm most proud of is that more than 95% of the bills I signed my first year in office had bipartisan support. Major accomplishment. My golly, people worked together on some really important issues. Representative Lautenbach, Representative Kolste, Senator Koyenga, and Senator Bewley came together to work on expanding access to health care in rural areas by making sure that Medicaid covers telehealth services in Wisconsin. Thanks to Senator Bernier, Senator Schachner, Representative Zimmerman, and Representative Brostoff, voters will not be denied their right to vote because they have a disability. And because of Representative Fiesfeld, Representative Bowen, Senator Johnson, and Senator Darling's good work, we signed a bill to train commercial drivers on recognizing and preventing human trafficking in Wisconsin. These bills exemplify what we can accomplish when we're focused on what unites us rather than what divides us. So I want to thank all of you for this good work. So I believe, as I've often said, there's more to an economy than just counting job creation. Asking job creators across our state, and they'll tell you that investing in a foundation of good quality of life and a diverse workplace is critical to a growing economy. We have to connect the dots and focus on the fundamentals of economic development. It's pretty simple stuff, folks. Good roads, good schools, and good health care. This year, we got back to the basics and made a down payment on these important priorities. Economic development starts with education. You know, what's best for our kids is what's best for our state. Although the budget I signed did not include my proposed $1.4 million for our kids, we still provided the largest increase in general aid to schools in more than a decade. Working together, we were able to invest more than $500 million in K-12 education, including the first increase in special education in 10 years. Thank you. I also used my veto authority to add nearly $100 million more in per pupil aid than the budget passed by the legislature. But when we talk about education, we can't ignore the elephant in the room of student debt. So tonight, I'm excited to announce that I will be signing an executive order creating a task force on student debt in Wisconsin. We have to work on making higher education available to more folks in our state. We have to understand how education-related debt affects not just our students, but their families too. And we have to address the fact that student debt is preventing folks from buying a car, starting a business, saving for retirement, and starting for a family. So thank you to our Department of Financial Institutions Secretary, Kathy Blumenfeld, who's going to be leading this effort. I'm excited for the task force to get to work. Kathy's out there somewhere. In addition to investing in our kids this year, we got back to the basics of economic development by investing in our transportation system. The budget I proposed provided a sustainable, long-term solution to our transportation funding crisis. And by the way, it didn't include raising the gas tax by $1. That said, the budget I did sign, however, provided more than $465 million in new funding for our highways, local roads, and transit aids, $320 million of which is going to fix our highways across the state. And we did that all while keeping bonding at the lowest level in 20 years. Thank you all for that. We are also able to do some important work in making health care more affordable and accessible. We weren't able to expand Medicaid, which would have allowed us to bring in $1.6 billion in new federal investment into our healthcare system. But the people's budget still made some important investments in lead testing and abatement, stabilizing the individual healthcare market and lowering health insurance premiums, and expanding access to rural healthcare. Finally, I delivered on my campaign promise for a 10% tax cut for Wisconsin's family. The people's budget, together with Assembly Bill 251, provided more than $500 million in tax relief for working middle-class families. That's money back in your pockets, folks. I know the budget I signed didn't include everything that everybody wanted. I know it didn't include everything I wanted. But because of the budget we proposed, we are able to move the needle on critically important issues, some for the first time in a generation. Now, as 2019 came to a close, we also began a new decade. And while there is time to contemplate 10 years worth of successes and failures, we must fight the temptation to cling to the nostalgia of yesterday. There is too much work to find comfort in complacency. We must set out in a new decade with a renewed set of purpose. We must be resolved to confront the challenges we face today, and we must be eager to embrace what may come tomorrow. The struggles we face will test both the depth of our empathy and the strength of our selflessness. But Wisconsinites, I know we are up to this task because it is the depth of our empathy and the strength of our selflessness that has defined who we are as a people for generations. People like Julie and John, who after losing a family member to suicide last year, decided to use the corn maze they host at their farm to raise awareness for suicide prevention. Julie and John are here tonight with us. Thank you so much, folks. Please stand. People like Reverend Mowers, who, after the only homeless shelter in his area closed a few years ago, worked with the Department of Safety and Professional Services to expedite the new shelter and get it open so his neighbors could have a place to stay. Reverend Mowers is up in the gallery tonight, and well-deserved thanks. Thank you very much. And people like Dua, who, when a gunshot rang out in the halls of her high school, ran to the nearby mosque where her father works and took more than 100 students with her to provide them shelter and cover. Thank you, Dua, for your courage and your bravery. Because of people like Dua, Dave, Julie, and John, and people just like them all across Wisconsin, that I have never been more hopeful about the future we're going to create. When we get to choose how we define the next decade, and folks, we're going to do that tonight. We're starting tonight. In Wisconsin, we're known as America's Dairyland. It's even a... It's on our license plates, and for good reason. In 2018, we produced more cheese than any other state, producing more than 26% of the nation's cheese, and we account for more than 14% of the nation's milk production. And all that dairy production and processing boast $43.4 billion in economic activity and supports almost 79,000 jobs. And it's not just, yeah, how about that? There's milk in there. And it's not just cheese and dairy, folks. Our agriculture diversity is one of the strengths of our state. We're one of the leading growers and processors of vegetables, from potatoes to green peas to snap beans and carrots, and we produce 62% of the nation's cranberry crop. In 2018, we exported more than $3 billion in agriculture products to more than 140 countries. All in all, agriculture contributes nearly $105 billion to our state's economy. But at the end of the day, these numbers tell the story of the folks whose sweat, work, and pride have been the pillar of our state for generations. America's Dairyland is more than bushels and bales and hundredweights. It's about people. Wisconsin was raised on the land of Native Americans who came before us and built on the backs of those farmers who came after them, and survives by the hands of the kids and grandkids who are the keepers of this legacy. Yet, despite our history, this tradition has been challenged. Between 2011 and 2018, Wisconsin lost about a third of our dairy farms. We lead the nation in farm bankruptcies. We've endured the consequences of unnecessary and unproductive tariffs and trade wars. And we've heard people who've said there's no place for small farms anymore. They ought to go big or bust. Well, they are wrong. They don't know Wisconsin. And in this state, no one carries the burden alone. We have leaned on farmers and their families. We have depended on their dedication, and we relied on their resilience. We have not forgotten those who have shared the harvest and bounty, feeding our families, our communities, and our state and our country for more than a century. And tonight, we say that we are ready to be a partner in the promise of posterity. I'm announcing a three-prong plan to start addressing these challenges. First, tonight, I'm calling a special session of the Legislature next week to take up legislation to invest in our farmers, agriculture industries, and our rural communities. The package of bills we'll announce tomorrow includes a bill creating the Wisconsin Initiative for Dairy Exports. We have to start maximizing the efficiency in our small and middle-sized farms, and we need to build Wisconsin's dairy brand in international markets and increase dairy exports. So we're going to Gesundheit too. So we're going to set a goal of increasing Wisconsin's dairy exports by 20% of the United States milk supply by the year 2024. Additionally, we're going to expand our farm center and increase staffing at the UW Extension to ensure that farmers and agriculture industries have partners and support closer to home. At the same time, we're also going to work to get the food our farmers produce to the tables right here in Wisconsin. So we're not only going to bolster our Farm to School program, but we're also announcing our Farm to Fork program that will help connect our farmers and the food they produce with our universities, our technical colleges, our hospitals, and local businesses across the state. Finally, we're going to create a new program that will focus on getting our farmers access to mental health services in Wisconsin. Our farm center is doing important work in this area, but we know folks are really struggling and they need access to those resources closer to home. Our mental health program will assist farmers in accessing mental health support. They will also help coordinate local and regional peer support programming and provide confidential one-on-one counseling and assistance to our farmers. The second prong of our plan is ensuring that investing in farmers, agriculture, and rural communities is part of our broader economic development strategies. So tonight, I am also announcing that I'll be working with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation to establish the Office of Rural Prosperity. The office will provide a one-stop shop for the folks to navigate state programs and the resources that are available that are tailored to rural communities, businesses, and workers. Finally, the third prong of our plan is to develop long-term strategies on this issue, not based on what folks in Madison think is best, but based on the feedback and input from folks all across the state. So tomorrow I'll make good on my campaign promise to create a Blue Ribbon Commission to help promote agriculture and rural economic prosperity. Our Blue Ribbon Commission on Rural Prosperity will convene folks in different industries from across the state. They'll work together to develop a long-term strategy on how we can best support the needs of rural Wisconsinites and rural communities. Some of these proposals aren't new. Many of them are a form of what I proposed in my budget that were unfortunately taken out. But here's the bottom line, folks. We're losing more than 2 dairy farms a day. And for each day we delay, the challenges will get harder and harder. So I want to be clear. I'm not under any misguided belief that what I'm proposing today is a silver bullet. In the coming months, it's going to take more listening than talking to hear from our farmers and our rural communities about how we can continue to invest in agriculture and rural prosperity across our state. But we have to start someplace, and we'll start tomorrow. Finally, in addition to addressing these challenges, I'd like to talk about another issue folks in our state care about. In 2017, Hans, who is a dairy farmer and a Lincoln County Board Supervisor, introduced a resolution supporting nonpartisan redistricting, kicking off a trend across our state. Today, 50 counties representing 78% of the people of Wisconsin have passed similar resolutions. Hans is up there in the gallery with us tonight. Hans, thank you for your work on this very important issue. Hans? Unfortunately, nonpartisan redistricting legislation has been introduced for years. It's even received bipartisan support. The bill has never been given a public hearing. Well, when more than 80% of our state supports medical marijuana and 80% support universal background checks and extreme risk protection orders, and 70% support expanding Medicaid, and elected officials can ignore those numbers without consequence, folks, something's wrong. People who work in this building, who sit in these seats, and who drive the policies in our state should not be able to ignore the people who sent us here. The will of the people is the law of the land, and by golly, people should not take no for an answer. So tonight, as promised, I am bringing the fight for nonpartisan redistricting to the legislature. In the coming days, I will be signing an executive order to create a nonpartisan redistricting commission who will draw the people's maps. Our nonpartisan redistricting commission will consist of the people of our state, not the elected officials, not lobbyists, not high-paid consultants. The People's Map Commission will visit every congressional district, hear directly from folks across our state, and draw fair, impartial maps for the legislature to take up next year. I believe, and Wisconsinites do too, that people should get to choose their elected officials, not the other way around. So when the people's maps are presented to the legislature next year, I hope they will receive unanimous bipartisan support. The nonpartisan redistricting and investing in our rural communities, to addressing youth vaping and capping the cost of insulin, to closing the dark store loophole and getting PFAS out of our water, we've got a lot of work to do. There's no rest for the elected, folks, and we've got a lot to do to get done before anyone takes a vacation. But as I stand here today and we turn to face the horizon of the upcoming decade, I have never been more hopeful about Wisconsin. And it's up to us to decide what kind of state we'll be 10 years from now. We can choose to relitigate past political tussles, or we can choose to transcend animosity to rise and greet the problems before us. We can choose to resent the hand that helps another, or we can choose to celebrate our neighbor's prosperity because therein lies our prosperity too. We can choose to say in this state, you go it alone, or you don't go at all, or we can say, in Wisconsin, when we move forward, we all go together. And you bet, we will most certainly face challenges, and yes, we will face adversity, but let us choose to be defined not by our indifference, but by our decency. Let's choose to be defined by the depth of our empathy and the strength of our selflessness. And let us plunge into the new decade chasing the charge of our bearers who came before us. Let's move forward together. It's time to get to work, folks. Thank you, and on Wisconsin.